in 1942, if we followed your philosophy of non-resistance for Europe and the rest of the countries that were invaded by Germany, would I be speaking with you now with a German accent, or exactly what would have happened if Abraham was, the philosophy was, meeting up against Hitler's regime? It seems to me that the passive would get run over and everybody would be eating schnitzel for breakfast.
Well, it seems that way when you take a premise of something that you saw moving in a direction, and then you say, it seems to me that the resistance that we garnered is what kept such and such from happening. And we say, on the other hand, it is what is causing things like it to continually be perpetuated. In other words, you are living your modern day Hitlers again and again and again and again and again. What you're saying is, when someone gathers forces who seems to be a bully and wants to push against another, shouldn't someone rise up big enough to push back? And we say, all you end up with is bigger and bigger pushing against and more using each other as your excuse not to allow your well-being. So let's really go back to the premise of what you're proposing. And let's acknowledge that someone has decided that the way you live is inappropriate and is pushing rather hard against it. And you've come to understand law of attraction, and so while they're pushing very hard against what you're doing and activating what they don't like in you in their vibration, and therefore attracting more of it to them from all places, you've deactivated. You're not looking at them. You're not letting them push your hot button. You're not pushing back at them. You are achieving vibrational harmony with your own desire. Maybe they're pushing at you, even helped you to discern a stronger, clearer desire, but you're not getting dragged into their vibration of pushing against. You are maintaining your vibration of well-being. You would become a non-issue to them so quickly because now they've got all this stuff aggravated. Their point of attraction is very strong. People all around the world are responding to it. They have far more things to deal with than you. You become an immediate non-issue.
So you would say that like America and Britain would just become invisible to Hitler if they assume this philosophy and just when it doesn't exist?
You would not provide the fodder to the fire that keeps him fueled. If there were no one pushing back at him, the majority of the energy that he had amassed would have been non-existent. You have to look at it this way. Now, whenever you're trying to figure something out on a world scope, figure it out on an individual scope, because the identical dynamics are in place. In other words, the laws of the universe are responding to two of you in the same way that they're responding to billions of you, and all of the dynamics are the same. So let's say that you have been practicing a vibration of well-being, and you are joyful. You are appreciative, you're clear-minded, you're tuned in, tapped in, turned on. You would not find yourself in the vibrational proximity of a bully. The law of attraction would just not put you together. But let's say something has happened. Maybe you got drafted into some service, or maybe you went home, or something happened. And let's say, for whatever reason, you had some of that vibration activated within you. And so you and the bully meet. And by bully, we mean anyone who's pushing at you for any reason. So you meet. And from what you're learning from Abraham, you would have to say, well, on some level, I attracted this right into my experience. I didn't mean to. I certainly didn't want it. But now that it's here, I acknowledge that something about me attracted it. So now, in other words, on some level, we are a match. And the level is always, I don't like him and he doesn't like me. In other words, that's the basic match. Now, if you weren't thinking about him, there'd be no match. But the fact that you don't like him and he doesn't like you, now there is this vibrational thing that's going on. So you're intertwined. So then you say, all right, I'm going to try to do what Gandhi did, or try to do what Jesus did, or try to hear what Abraham is saying. I'm going to follow the path of least or no resistance. I'm not going to buy into that. But you're already connected enough that he's got your attention, and he wants your attention, so he keeps poking at you with a stick. Well, if you weren't pretty good at understanding well-being, as he's poking at you with a stick, you're probably going to get provoked, which is exactly what he wants. So as he provokes you and you now turn your attention, now you're engaged, which is what he had in mind the whole time. Someone who wants power doesn't want passivity, doesn't want somebody not interested. They want somebody to push back against them. In other words, you can't have a war unless there's somebody that's fighting against you. In other words, you've got to stir it up. If that is your mentality, you've got to stir it up. But it does not mean that you have to play the game. So now you're engaged in this and you say, oh, I don't like this even more than I thought I wouldn't like it. In other words, I really don't like this. I'm going to choose what's dominant in my vibration. Sure, he's poking at me with a stick. Sure, it's not easy to ignore. Sure, I've brought myself this far. It's sort of like having a disease in your body that you didn't see coming and now it's there, and once it's full blown, it's harder to deal with than if you dealt with it before. But so here you stand and you say, I'm going to choose what's dominant in my vibration. So he pokes at you, and you notice that the world's beautiful over there, and he pokes at you, and you notice that there's well-being over there, and he pokes at you, and you notice that he's a non-issue. You notice that your life goes pretty well, except when you're being poked a little, and less do you notice his poking, and more do you notice well-being, until you literally become so vibrationally different from him that the poking is no longer any fun for him. Because you vibrated out of range, and the same time you were vibrating out of range, others were vibrating into range. In other words, his enemies just bring themselves right to him, you see. What goes wrong with humans is they say, I want world peace. And we say, world peace is none of your business. Personal peace is. You can't orchestrate world peace. The only way you could ever orchestrate world peace is if you could convince everyone to want exactly the same thing. And you don't have a prayer of doing that. There is no possibility of getting everyone to agree with you, you see. So then you say, yes, but what if I ignore him? And so I disengage him from my vibration. Good word, isn't it? I've deactivated, and so I've disengaged him from my vibration. But what about the others that he's trampling? What about those that don't know as much as I do? And we say, now you're back involved. In other words, you get to choose. And we're not for a moment suggesting that getting involved is wrong. What we are getting at here is there are a lot of people that want purpose in life. They want reason. They want something to focus upon. In other words, the war or the cause, at what point does anyone get to decide that it's gone past nobility and patriotism and into terrorism and overtaking other countries? In other words, it's really a fine line who gets to decide who the bad guy is and who the good guy is. And always the good guy is you and the bad guy is them. And you all think that, you see. Okay. So finally, when you say, I don't have to figure it out for any of them, and I'm going to align with the energy of well-being and follow that path, then it gets easier for you to watch everyone else play out their games. Every now and again, Esther will find herself straddling the line. She can't decide if she's happy that the government is making effort to protect all of you, or if she is worried that the government and all of its efforts are part of the cause of the problem. And then Esther discovers that there's no right answer to that, but the answer for her is withdraw from the thought and live happily ever after. And it is our promise to her and generations that follow. You do not need to worry about what anybody else is doing if you're taking care of your own vibration. Would say that to an individual, we could never say it to a nation. A nation is made up of too many different vibrational beings, you see. We'll also say to you that in the midst of every upheaval, there are those that continue to thrive. Even in the midst of this that you bring up about Hitler, there were Jews, even living then, that were not affected by all of that. There are those whose sensitivity got them out in time. There were those whose sensitivity and lack of vibrational interaction with it left them untouched. There are all kinds of scenarios that if you were to do any sort of examination, you would have to discover that it is really a variable depending upon what your vibrational nature is. There are people today that are living in what, certainly by those standards of those times, have to be considered the best of times right here in your nation, and they are utterly miserable with no outside force doing anything at all to them. And there are those living in far worse circumstances than that that are joyful. How do you figure that out? You have to figure it out, that it is not about what's happening outside, it's what's happening inside. People say things like, it's not about what's happening, it's about your reaction to what's happening. And we say, If you will start controlling the way you feel, then your reaction will be in your control too. And then nothing in all of this universe could do anything except support and soothe you. As an uplifter, we hear the basis of these questions because you're a teacher to the very core of your being. And it's not an easy thing to know what you know and to live a life that is stable and good feeling and see others around you that have not figured it out or who cannot find their way. Knowing your way is the best possibility of them finding their way. And ultimately, at the moment of their transition, they will recall it all. And their lives have not been lost or wasted. They are contributing massively. You see, as we visit with you here, with all of you here, with all that is human and deliberately creating in your physical environment, we do not worry about your contribution because you cannot help but make it. We do not worry that you will not fulfill because you cannot avoid that. Your deciphering of data and the preference that is born within you makes you the leading edge attractor that you intended to be. And we are not concerned that eternalness will not continue. It must. And we are not concerned about the salvation of your soul because it is assured. And we are not worried about your dying because when you die, you reemerge into pure positive energy. And we are not worried about your placement when you die because we know the worthiness and the true nature of your being. The only reason that we visit with you in this format at all is because in this powerful now, you deserve to feel good. And since your life is now, we want you to feel good now. Not toward some world peace end, not toward some getting the house I want end, not toward bringing someone who's out of balance back into, because you are a pure energy who intended to use your powerful now to feel good now. We want you in on the expansion that you are so much a part of, you see. Your value is not in question. Your worthiness is not in question. Your future is not even in question. The only thing that is ever in question is your now. How do you feel now? How do you feel now? So you can acknowledge the value before you in this world and feel good now, or you can find pockets of things to worry and fuss about and not feel good now. It's your choice. But we wish for you fulfilling, satisfying, life-giving now.